The warning sirens screamed across every city on Earth. People looked up at the sky and saw nothing but blue. But they knew. Everyone knew. The aliens had arrived. Commander Taemin stood in the orbital defense station, staring at the screens in front of him. 300 ships. The Kalash had brought 300 warships, and they surrounded Earth like predators circling wounded prey. His hands were steady on the console, but his heart hammered in his chest. "Sir, they're broadcasting again," said a young officer behind him. Tae-Min nodded. He had heard the message 17 times already. The same words, the same cold voice. Surrender or die. 24 hours. That was all humanity had left. The Kalash Dominion had conquered 47 civilizations. They had shown no mercy to any of them. Entire species had been enslaved or exterminated. Their fleets were unstoppable, their technology far beyond anything humans had developed. And now they wanted Earth. Captain Hyjin checked her fighter systems for the third time. Everything was ready. The experimental destroyer Indomitable hummed around her, its engines warm and waiting. She was the best pilot in the fleet, and she knew it. But even the best pilot couldn't fight 300 warships alone. "Nervous?" asked Lieutenant J1 through the comm system. He was young, barely 23, and this would be his first real battle. "Terrified," Hyjin answered honestly. "But we fly anyway." Down on Earth, Dr. Sungho sat in his laboratory deep beneath the Himalayan mountains. His eyes were red from crying, from not sleeping, from staring at equations that damned his soul. The Prometheus Project. He had created it. He had built the weapon that would save humanity. And he hated himself for it. The door opened and Admiral Kyung-soo entered. The old man looked tired, older than his 60 years. He had commanded Earth forces for 2 decades, had prepared for this day, but nothing could truly prepare anyone for extinction. "Is it ready?" Kyung-soo asked. Sungho nodded slowly. "Yes, but Admiral, you need to understand what this will do." "The cost. I know the cost," Kyung-soo interrupted. "We all do. The question is whether we're willing to pay it. The people don't know. The 16 million who will, they'll be heroes," Kyung-soo said firmly. "History will remember them as heroes." Sungho looked away. History was written by survivors, and he wondered what kind of history would remember what they were about to do. High above Earth, the Kalash fleet waited. Envoy Takaresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue planet below. Such a beautiful world. Such primitive defenders. His sensory organs twitched with anticipation. This would be easy. "They refused to surrender," reported his tactical officer. Takaresh made a sound that resembled laughter. "Of course they do. They always refuse at first. They think they can fight. They think they have a chance. Begin the assault. Target their cities first. Let them watch their homes burn. Then they will beg for surrender." Back on the orbital station, Commander Taemin received the final authorization codes. They came directly from Earth's Security Council, encrypted and sealed. His hand shook as he entered his personal code to unlock them. Inside the sealed orders was a single phrase: "If conventional defense fails, activate Prometheus Protocol." Authorization granted. He had known this moment would come. They had all known. But knowing and doing were different things. "Sir, Kalash fighters are launching," reported the sensor officer. "Hundreds of them. They're heading toward major population centers." Taemin looked at the screens. He could see the trajectories. New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, Beijing. The Kalash would kill billions in the first strike. They would make humanity watch as their world burned. "All forces engage," Taemin ordered. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a commander who had made his choice. "Fight them with everything we have. Hold nothing back. Across Earth's orbital perimeter, every ship, every station, every weapon platform activated. Thousands of missiles launched. Railguns fired. Laser batteries turned the darkness of space into a light show of destruction. Humanity's entire military force threw itself at the invading fleet. Captain Hyjin's fighter screamed away from the Indomitable, leading a squadron of 50 ships toward the incoming Kalash wave. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, her mind calculating angles and trajectories without conscious thought. This was what she was born to do. "Stay tight," she ordered her squadron. "Hit them fast and break away. Don't try to be heroes. We need to stay alive as long as possible." Lieutenant J1 followed close behind her, his fighter matching her movements. He was scared, so scared his hands trembled on the controls, but he wouldn't let her see it. He wouldn't let anyone see it. The two fleets met in a storm of fire and metal. Human missiles struck Kalash shields and exploded uselessly. Kalash plasma weapons cut through human ships like they were paper. Within seconds, 12 human fighters were gone, just scattered debris spinning into the void. Hyjin gritted her teeth and kept firing. They were losing. She could see it in the numbers, in the way the enemy barely slowed down. But they had to try. They had to fight. Because if they didn't, if they just gave up, then humanity deserved to die. On Earth, people watched the battle on their screens. They watched their defenders die. They watched the Kalash fleet advance. And they prayed to whatever gods they believed in that someone, somewhere, had a plan to save them. Deep in his mountain laboratory, Dr. Sungho watched the same screens. His finger hovered over a single button. The button that would activate Prometheus. The button that would save 6 billion lives and destroy 16 million souls. He wasn't ready to press it. He would never be ready. But when Commander Taemin gave the order, he would press it anyway. Because that was what duty demanded. That was what survival required. The battle raged on, and humanity's hopes died with each passing minute. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and Earth was losing. Captain Hyjin pulled her fighter into a hard turn, barely avoiding a plasma bolt that would have vaporized her. Around her, space was filled with debris, bodies, and the dying screams of pilots over the comm channels. "Red Squadron is gone," someone reported. "Blue Squadron down to 3 ships. Green Squadron," the voice cut off in static. Hyjin checked her tactical display. Of the 300 fighters that had launched at the start of the battle, fewer than 80 remained. The Kalash had lost ships too, but not enough. "Never enough. J1, status," she called out. "Still here, Captain," the young lieutenant responded. His voice was strained, exhausted. "Running low on missiles. Down to guns. Stay with me. We're pulling back to regroup with the Indomitable." But the Indomitable wasn't there anymore. Hyjin saw the wreckage as she came around Earth's curve. The experimental destroyer, humanity's most advanced warship, was now just twisted metal and frozen bodies floating in the void. On the lunar surface, Colonel Bauer watched the battle through her instruments. Luna Base housed the most powerful railguns humanity had ever built. Massive weapons that could accelerate projectiles to a fraction of light speed. She had been waiting for the right moment, waiting for the Kalash fleet to cluster together. "Target lock on Kalash Cruiser Formation Delta," her weapons officer reported. 15 ships in formation. Range optimal. Bauer didn't hesitate. "Fire all batteries." The lunar surface shook as 40 railguns fired simultaneously. 40 tungsten rounds, each weighing several tons, crossed the distance to the Kalash fleet in seconds. They struck with the force of nuclear weapons. Shields that had shrugged off missiles and lasers shattered under the kinetic impact. 12 Kalash cruisers simply exploded, torn apart by the devastating strikes. For a moment, there was hope. For a moment, Humanity thought they had found the weapon that could turn the tide. Then the Kalash fleet turned all their weapons on Luna. Base. Ura had 30 seconds to realize what was happening. 30 seconds to hit the base-wide evacuation alarm. 30 seconds to know that it wouldn't be enough. All personnel evacuate immediate. Her words were cut off as the first plasma beam hit. Luna Base held 16,000 people. Scientists, soldiers, their families. The Kalash bombardment lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, Luna Base was gone. Just a glowing crater on the moon's surface. 16,000 lives erased in an instant. On Earth, people screamed. They watched it happen on their screens. They watched the moon itself burn. Admiral Kyung-soo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the carrier Defiant. He had fought in 3 wars, had commanded fleets across the solar system, had trained his entire life for this moment. And none of it mattered. His fleet was dying around him. "Sir, we've lost 60% of our capital ships," his tactical officer reported. The young woman's voice was steady, professional, even though tears ran down her face. "Kalash forces are beginning orbital bombardment of Sydney." Kyung-soo closed his eyes. Sydney. 3 million people. He opened a channel to Commander Taemin on the orbital station. "Taemin, this is Kyung-soo. We can't hold them. You need to authorize Prometheus. Now." "Admiral, if we do this, I know what it means," Kyung-soo said quietly. "I know the cost. But if we don't, there won't be anyone left to pay any cost at all. Do it. That's an order." The channel closed. Kyung-soo turned to look at his crew. They were also young. He had trained most of them himself. Now he would die with them. "All ships, this is Admiral Kyung-soo. It's been an honor serving with you. Fight to the last. Make them pay for every meter of space. Make them remember that humanity doesn't surrender." The Kalash fire intensified. A plasma beam cut through the Defiant shields and sliced the flagship in half. Admiral Kyung-soo died instantly, along with 3,000 crew members. The wreckage tumbled away into space, joining the graveyard of human dreams. Commander Taemin watched it happen. He watched the Admiral die. He watched Sydney burn as Kalash weapons struck the Australian coast. He watched his entire species stand on the edge of extinction. And he knew what he had to do. His console was covered in blood from where a panel had exploded earlier, cutting his forehead. He could barely see through the red in his eyes. His hands found the sealed controls for the Prometheus protocol. Dr. Sung-ho's face appeared on his screen. The scientist looked like he had aged 20 years in 6 hours. Tears ran down his face openly. "Please," Sung-ho whispered. "Taemin, please think about what you're doing. Those 16 million people, they didn't consent to this. We're going to turn them into weapons. We're going to change them forever. Many of them will die. The others will wish they had." Taemin's finger hovered over the authorization button. "What choice do I have? What choice do any of us have?" "We could surrender," Sung-ho said. "We could live as slaves instead of dying free. Or we could let those 16 million live normal lives instead of burning them up as ammunition." "And what kind of life would they have under Kalash rule?" Taemin asked. "What kind of life would any of us have?" Sung-ho had no answer. He just cried. Taemin looked at the tactical display one more time. 78% casualties. Earth's fleet was gone. The Kalash were preparing for a full planetary assault. In hours, maybe less, billions would die. He pressed the button. Across Earth, hidden installations began to power up. 73 facilities on 6 continents, buried deep underground where no one knew they existed. Each one connected to a massive power grid. Each one focused on a single purpose. Dr. Young-mi, working in a monitoring station in Seoul, watched her screens in horror as bioreadings began to spike across the planet. 16 million people. Their neural patterns were changing, expanding, burning with impossible energy. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, what have we done?" In orbit, Captain Hygiene was lining up another attack run when she felt it. A burning sensation in her mind, like someone had poured molten metal directly into her brain. She screamed, her hands jerking away from the controls. Her fighter spun wildly. Lieutenant J1 heard her scream and tried to reach her. Then he felt it too. The burning, the changing. His consciousness expanding outward in ways that shouldn't be possible. Across Earth, in cities and villages and remote outposts, 16 million people began to scream. Some collapsed immediately, blood pouring from their noses and ears. Others clutched their heads, their minds on fire with awakening power in soul. A schoolteacher named Hay1 watched her hands begin to glow with invisible fire. She could feel every mind around her, could sense the thoughts and fears of her students. And when she reached out instinctively to make it stop, 3 of her students collapsed, their minds overloaded by her uncontrolled power. The Prometheus Protocol had activated. Humanity's desperate gamble had begun. And across the planet, 16 million voices screamed as they were transformed into weapons they never asked to become. The pain was unlike anything Captain Hygiene had ever experienced. Her mind felt like it was expanding, stretching beyond the limits of her skull, reaching out into space around her. She could feel Lieutenant J1's fighter nearby, could sense his terror and confusion, as if they were her own emotions. "What's happening to me?" J1's voice came through the comm, but Hygiene could also hear his thoughts directly in her mind. It was overwhelming. She looked at her hands on the controls and realized she didn't need them anymore. Her fighter responded to her thoughts, banking and turning without her touching anything. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Across Earth, the transformation continued. In a hospital in Delhi, a nurse named Kiran felt her mind open up like a flower. She could sense every patient in the building, feel their pain, their fear. When she tried to help them, to ease their suffering, her power lashed out uncontrollably. 12 patients died instantly, their hearts stopped by psionic feedback. In Cairo, a construction worker named Ahmed felt reality bend around him. He could see things that weren't there, or maybe they were there, and he had never been able to see them before. He reached out to touch the air, and space itself rippled. The building he was standing in collapsed, killing 17 people. Dr. Sungho watched the monitoring screens with tears streaming down his face. The death toll was climbing rapidly. 2 million, 2.3 million, 2.5 million. The kindled, as the awakened were already being called, were dying faster than he had calculated. Their bodies couldn't handle the transformation. Their minds burned out like overloaded circuits. "Stop it," he begged Commander Taemin over the comm. "Please, we have to stop it." "They're dying." "We can't stop it," Taemin replied. His voice was hollow dead. "It's already done. The only thing we can do now is hope it works." On the Kalash flagship, Envoy Takaresh felt the first touch of the psionic wave and dismissed it as sensor malfunction. Then his tactical officer collapsed, purple blood pouring from his sensory organs. "What is happening?" Takaresh demanded. All across his fleet, Kalash warriors were falling. They clutched their heads, their equivalent of screams echoing through the ships. Something was in their minds, burning through their thoughts like acid. "Emergency shields," Takaresh ordered. "Activate psionic dampeners." But they had no psionic dampeners. The Kalash had never encountered psionic warfare before. They had no defense against it. Captain Hygiene felt the Kalash minds like distant stars, cold and alien. And she felt 16 million other minds reaching out with her, a vast network of human consciousness united by pain and power. Together, they reached toward the Kalash fleet, and they squeezed. It wasn't a physical force. It was something deeper, more fundamental. The kindled reached into the Kalash minds and simply turned them off. Like flipping a switch. Like closing a door. One moment the Kalash were alive, thinking, feeling. The next moment they were gone. Takaresh felt his crew dying around him. He tried to give orders, but his own mind was fragmenting, breaking apart under the psionic assault. His last thought was confusion. How had these primitive creatures done this? How had they developed such power? Then he was gone. Across the Kalash fleet, 300 warships went silent. Engines continued running on automatic systems, weapons still charged, shields still active. But every living thing aboard was dead. 60,000 Kalash warriors, gone in 18 minutes. In Seoul, Dr. Youngmi watched the bio readings collapse. Of 16 million kindled, 2.3 million were already dead. Their brains had simply burned out from the effort. The others were still alive, but their readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. They weren't entirely human anymore. Commander Taemin stared at his tactical display. Every red hostile indicator had turned gray. Dead. All of them dead. 300 warships, 60,000 alien warriors, eliminated in less than 20 minutes. We won. Someone whispered behind him. Tae-min didn't feel like they had won. He felt like they had lost something far more important than a battle. He felt like they had lost their humanity. Dr. Sungho appeared on his screen again. The scientist looked broken, his face gray with shock and grief. It worked, Sungho said numbly. The Prometheus protocol worked exactly as designed. We saved Earth, we killed the invaders, and we destroyed 16 million lives to do it. How many dead? Taemin asked. 2.3 million in the initial awakening. 847,000 civilians killed by uncontrolled psionic discharge. The remaining 13.7 million are alive, but changed. Forever changed. In her fighter, Captain Hyjin heard those numbers and wanted to scream. She could still feel the other kindled minds around her. 30 million souls connected in a web of pain and power. She could feel their grief, their horror at what they had become. Lieutenant J1's voice crackled over the com. Captain, what did they do to us? What are we now? Hyjin didn't have an answer. She looked at her hands, still glowing with invisible power. She could feel every circuit in her fighter, could sense the debris floating around her, could touch the minds of every survivor in orbit. The power was intoxicating and terrifying. I don't know, she finally said. I don't know what we are anymore. On Earth, the schoolteacher Haewon sat surrounded by the bodies of her students. 3 children dead because she couldn't control her power. She could still feel their last moments. Their confusion and pain burned into her memory forever. She looked at her hands and saw the blood. Not physical blood. Something deeper. She had killed children. Innocent children. And for what? To save humanity from the Kalash? Was it worth it? She whispered to no one. Across the planet, 13.7 million kindled asked themselves the same question. In space, the Kalash fleet drifted silently. 300 ghost ships filled with corpses. Humanity had won its first battle against an alien invasion. They had proven they could fight back. They had shown the galaxy that Earth would not surrender. But the cost was already becoming clear. 16 million people had been transformed into weapons without their consent. 2.3 million had died in the process. Almost 1 million more civilians had been killed by uncontrolled psionic power. And the survivors? They would never be normal again. They could feel each other's thoughts, sense each other's pain. They were connected in ways that would never break. They were weapons now, living weapons, and there was no way to undo what had been done to them. Commander Taemin sat in his command chair and listened to the reports coming in. Sydney had been evacuated. The fires were being brought under control. Luna Base was gone, but could be rebuilt. The Kalash fleet was destroyed, eliminated. No longer a threat. Victory. This was what victory looked like. He had never felt more like a monster in his entire life. Dr. Sunho closed his monitoring station and walked away. He couldn't look at the screens anymore. Couldn't watch the bio readings of 13 million people who would never be the same. People who have been sacrificed on the altar of survival. He had created Prometheus. He had built the weapon that saved humanity. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he would burn in whatever hell existed for what he had done. Above Earth, Captain Haijin guided her fighter back toward the orbital station. She could hear Commander Taemin's voice calling for all survivors to return. She could feel the minds of the other pilots, the grief and horror that matched her own. They had saved Earth, but what had Earth done to them? That was the question that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. 3 days after the battle, Earth was still counting its dead. The Kalash fleet remained in orbit, 300 silent ghost ships that no one knew what to do with. But the real crisis was happening on the surface. Captain Haijin sat in a special containment facility built in just 48 hours. The walls were lined with psionic dampeners, technology humans barely understood but had to implement desperately. She hadn't slept since the battle. Every time she closed her eyes, her nightmares leaked out and shredded the minds of everyone nearby. The first time it happened, 17 doctors and nurses had collapsed, screaming. Now she stayed awake through sheer willpower, her eyes red and burning with exhaustion. Lieutenant J1 visited her wearing a full psionic dampening suit. He looked like an astronaut, sealed inside layers of specialized material. Even through all that protection, Haijin could feel his mind, his sadness and guilt. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Haijin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I can feel 13 million people screaming in my head, J1. Every moment of every day. I can feel their pain, their grief, their rage. How do you think I'm holding up?" J1 didn't answer. What could he say? Across Earth, the Kindled struggled with their new reality. In Tokyo, a businessman named Hiro accidentally killed his wife when she touched him. His psionic field had become unstable, dangerous. He turned himself into authorities and begged them to kill him before he hurt anyone else. In São Paulo, a young mother named Maria watched her children back away from her in fear. They could sense what she had become, could feel the wrongness radiating from her. She hadn't touched them in 3 days. Didn't dare to. Dr. Jiwoo, a psychologist brought in to work with the Kindled, sat across from a teenager named Minacio. The girl was 17, had been looking forward to college, had a whole life ahead of her. Now she sat in a containment cell, her hands wrapped in special gloves, tears running down her face. "Tell me what happened," Jiwoo said gently. Minseo's voice was barely a whisper. "I was having dinner with my family. My parents, my little brother. Then the burning started. I felt my mind explode outward, and I couldn't stop it. I felt them die. Dr. Giwoo. I felt their minds break apart. My mother's last thought was confusion. She didn't understand why I was hurting her. And I killed her. I killed all of them." Jiwoo wrote notes with shaking hands. This was the 100th story like this she had heard. Maybe the 1000th. The Kindled weren't just living weapons. They were traumatized, damaged people who had been forced into this transformation and were now living with the consequences. Commander Taemin stood before a military tribunal. The room was filled with generals, politicians, and judges. They wanted answers. They wanted someone to blame. "You activated the Prometheus protocol, knowing it would kill millions," the lead prosecutor said. "You turned 16 million people into weapons without their consent. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Taemin met the prosecutor's eyes. "I saved 6 billion lives at the cost of 16 million souls. Yes, I understand exactly what I did. And you feel no remorse? I feel nothing but remorse, Taemin said quietly. Every moment of every day. But I would do it again if I had to. Because the alternative was extinction. Dr. Sung-ho was called to testify. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 3 days. His hands shook as he explained the Prometheus Protocol to the tribunal. The world governments knew this would happen, he said. They knew about the psionic potential in certain genetic lines. They knew that forcing the awakening would be painful, traumatic, and deadly. They built the system anyway. Only a handful of people knew the full truth. The rest thought it was a conventional superweapon. So this was planned? A judge asked in horror. For 20 years, Sung-ho confirmed. Ever since we made contact with the Vel and learned about psionic abilities. We identified 16 million people worldwide with the right genetic markers. We built the activation facilities. We prepared for this day. And when it came, we sacrificed those 16 million people without asking them, without warning them, without giving them any choice at all. The room erupted in chaos. Politicians shouted. Journalists recorded everything. The world watched in horror as the full truth came out. President Dae-jung appeared on screens worldwide that evening. He looked tired, old, defeated. My fellow citizens, he began. Today you learned the truth about the Prometheus Protocol. You learned that your government, your elected leaders, created a system that would sacrifice millions to save billions. You learned that we made this choice without public debate, without consent, without transparency. And you're right to be angry. You're right to feel betrayed. Because we did betray you. We betrayed the 16 million kindled most of all. I take full responsibility for this decision. I will resign tomorrow. But before I do, I want to say one thing to the kindled who might be listening. I'm sorry. Those words aren't enough. They'll never be enough. But they're all I have. We used you. We turned you into weapons. And you deserve better than that. Humanity deserves better than that. The speech did nothing to calm the anger spreading across Earth. Riots broke out in major cities. People demanded justice, accountability, change. The governments that had approved Prometheus began to collapse one by one. But worse news was coming. Commander Taemin received the report from deep space, monitoring stations. His blood ran cold as he read it. Another Kalash fleet. This one was bigger. 800 ships. They had detected the destruction of the first fleet and called for reinforcements. They were coming to finish what they started. And they would arrive in 2 weeks. Tae-min called an emergency meeting with the surviving military leadership. Captain Haejin was brought in under heavy guard and psionic dampening. Lieutenant Jae-won attended via video link, too unstable to be in the same room with others. We can't fight them, one general said immediately. Our fleet is destroyed. We have maybe 30 functional warships left. Against 800? It's impossible. Everyone looked at Haejin. She knew what they were thinking. They were thinking about the kindled. 13 million living weapons. Humanity's only hope. No, she said firmly. We're not your weapons. We didn't choose this. We won't fight for you. If you don't fight, everyone dies, the general said. Including you. Haejin stood up and even through the dampeners, everyone in the room could feel her power. It was like standing next to a nuclear reactor. Dangerous. Unstable. You made us into this, she said quietly. You burned out our humanity to save your own. And now you want us to do it again? To sacrifice ourselves again for people who used us like ammunition. What choice do we have? Taemin asked. Not as a commander. As a human being. As someone who knew he had damned these people and was asking them to forgive him anyway. Haejin looked at him for a long moment. She could feel his guilt, his grief, his genuine remorse. It didn't make what he had done right, but it made him human. "I don't know," she finally said. "I need to talk to the others. The Kindled. We'll make our own decision this time. Not you. Not the government. Us." She left the meeting, and Taemin knew that the fate of humanity now rested in the hands of the people they had wronged most deeply. The people they had sacrificed. The people who had every right to let humanity burn. In her cell, Minseo felt the call go out through the psionic network. Captain Hyjin was reaching out to all the Kindled, asking them to come together, asking them to make a choice. Fight or let Earth fall. Save the people who had used them, or let those people face the consequences of their actions. Minseo thought about her dead family, about all the other Kindled who had lost everything, about the pain and trauma they all carried now. What did they owe humanity? What did they owe the people who had turned them into monsters? She didn't know, but she knew they had to decide together, because if nothing else, they had each other now. 30 million souls bound together by pain and power, and whatever they decided would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the fate of their own souls. 2 weeks felt like both an eternity and an instant. The Kindled gathered in what they called the network, a shared psionic space where their minds could meet without physical presence. 30 million consciousness touched, argued, and grieved together. They split into 3 groups quickly. Captain Hyjin led the largest faction. She called them the Guardians. 8 million Kindled who believed, despite everything, that they had to protect Earth, not because humanity deserved it, but because it was the right thing to do. "We didn't ask for this power," Hyjin said to the network. "We didn't choose to become weapons, but we are what we are now. And if we let Earth fall because we're angry, because we want revenge, then we become the monsters they made us. We lose what's left of our humanity." A man named Taeyang led the second group. 3 million Kindled who called themselves the Forsaken. They believed humanity had to pay for what it did. They wanted justice, accountability, punishment. They used us. Taeyang's thoughts echoed through the network. They burned us up like ammunition and never asked permission. 2 million of us died in the activation. Almost 1 million civilians died from our uncontrolled power. And now they want us to do it again? To sacrifice ourselves again? No. Let them face the consequences of their actions. The third group didn't have a leader. They were the silent. 2 million Kindled too damaged to fight, too broken to make decisions. Minseo was one of them. She sat in her cell and felt the arguments wash over her like waves. She had killed her family. What right did she have to decide anything? Commander Taemin was released from custody for one reason. Captain Hyjin had requested it. She said he was the only person she trusted to speak honestly about what had happened. The only person who wouldn't lie or try to manipulate them. Tae-min stood before a gathering of the Guardians. 8 million minds focused on him, and the pressure of their attention nearly drove him to his knees. But he stayed standing. "Why should we fight for you?" Hyjin asked simply. Tae-min could have lied. Could have appealed to their patriotism, their sense of duty, their heroism. Instead, he told the truth. "You shouldn't," he said. "You don't owe humanity anything. We took your lives, your futures, your very souls, and used them as weapons. We did it without asking. We did it knowing many of you would die. And we did it because we were desperate and afraid and willing to sacrifice you to save ourselves. That's the truth. That's what we did. And you have every right to hate us for it." The Guardians were silent. They had expected justifications, excuses, appeals. Not this raw honesty. "So why are you here?" Hyjin asked. "Because I'm asking you anyway," Taemin said. "Not as a commander. Not on behalf of the government. Just as one human being to others. I'm asking you to save billions of people who don't deserve to be saved, who failed you, who used you. I'm asking you to be better than we were. And I'll understand if you say no." He left without another word. The Guardians debated for hours. In the end, they decided to fight. Not for humanity, for each other. Because they were all each other had now. Taeyong and the Forsaken took control of several cities. They declared independence from Earth's governments. They demanded that everyone who had approved the Prometheus Protocol be tried for crimes against humanity. They said they would help fight the Kalash only after justice was served. President Taeyong, already planning to resign, agreed immediately. He turned himself into Forsaken custody. So did every other government official who had known about Prometheus. 14 people in total. They stood trial in front of kindled judges, and the world watched. All 14 were found guilty. But the Forsaken didn't execute them. Instead, they were sentenced to live the rest of their lives helping the kindled, caring for the silent, supporting those too damaged to care for themselves. They would spend every day facing what they had done. It was a mercy they didn't deserve. But the Forsaken gave it anyway. With justice beginning, Taeyong brought his 3 million Forsaken to join the Guardians. Together, 11 million kindled prepared to defend Earth one more time. The Kalash fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 800 ships, bristling with weapons, ready to avenge their fallen fleet. But this time, they were prepared. They had psionic dampeners, null field generators, specialized shields. They had studied the destruction of the first fleet and adapted. The battle would not be easy. It would not be quick. And many would die. Captain Haijin sat in her fighter, no longer needing the controls. She guided it with thought alone. Around her, 11 million kindled prepared to fight. She could feel every one of them in the network. Feel their fear, their determination, their grief. "We're not doing this for them," Taeyong's voice echoed through the network. "We're doing this for each other. Remember that. We protect each other. We save each other. That's what matters." The Kalash fleet opened fire. Plasma beams and missiles filled space. The battle began. This time, the psionic assault was slower. The Kalash dampeners worked, reducing the kindled's power. What had taken 18 minutes before now took hours. The kindled had to push through the defenses, had to burn through their own strength to reach the enemy mines. Haijin felt kindled dying, not from enemy weapons, but from the effort. Their minds burning out from pushing too hard, trying to break through the Kalash defenses. She felt a young man named Daehyun die, his consciousness snuffing out like a candle. Then a woman named Sora. Then dozens more. Lieutenant Jae-won fought beside her, his mind linked with hers. Together they pushed through a Kalash cruiser's defenses and shut down its crew. But the effort left Jae-won's nose bleeding, his vision blurred. "I can't keep this up," he whispered. "Then rest," Haijin told him. "Let others take over. We do this together." Across the network, Kindle took turns pushing against the Kalash fleet. When some grew too weak, others stepped in. It was brutal, exhausting, agonizing. But slowly, painfully, they began to win. Taeyong led a strike against the Kalash southern flank. 3 million Forsaken hit them all at once, overwhelming the dampeners through sheer coordinated power. 80 Kalash ships went dark in minutes. But the cost was terrible. 500,000 Forsaken died from the effort. Min-Shisio, watching from Earth, felt the deaths through the network. Felt each mind go dark. She had thought she was too broken to fight. But watching others die, feeling their sacrifice, something changed in her. She reached out to the network. Her power was weak, damaged, but it was still there. She added her strength to the others. And across Earth, 2 million silent did the same. They couldn't fight on the front lines, but they could support those who did. They could share the burden. The battle lasted 8 hours. When it ended, 800 Kalash ships drifted dead in space. Earth had won again. But this time, 4 million Kindled had died, burned themselves out saving a world that had used them as weapons. Commander Taemin received the casualty reports with tears streaming down his face. Of 16 million who had been transformed, only 7 million remained. 9 million dead to save 6 billion. Captain Hyjin returned to Earth blind. Her mind had been pushed too far, burned too bright. She could never see again. Lieutenant J1 caught her as she stumbled from her fighter, both of them covered in blood from burst vessels. Was it worth it? She asked him. The same question everyone was asking. J1 thought about the answer for a long time. We're alive. Earth's alive. 7 billion people get to wake up tomorrow. But worth it? I don't know if anyone gets to decide that except us. The ones who paid the price. Dr. Sungho visited Hyjin in the hospital a week later. He was old now, his hair completely white, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, he said. It was all he could say. Hyjin turned her blind eyes toward his voice. Tell him something for me. Tell everyone who survived. We didn't sacrifice ourselves for Earth. We were sacrificed by Earth. There's a difference. And they need to remember that difference. 5 years passed. Earth rebuilt. The Kalash Dominion, having lost 2 fleets to 1 small planet, left humanity alone. Other alien species heard the story and approached Earth cautiously, some with respect, some with fear. The Kindled established their own territory. They called it New Pyongyang, a city-state where they govern themselves. 7 million survivors, trying to build new lives with the pieces of themselves that remained. Some species admired what humanity had done. Others were horrified. The Vel, who had first taught humans about psionic potential, severed all contact. They called the Prometheus Protocol the rape of consciousness itself, and wanted nothing to do with the species that had committed such an act. Dr. Sungho gave his final interview on his deathbed. He was 83 years old, his body failing, his mind still sharp and filled with guilt. We won 2 battles and lost our soul, he said to the camera. We proved humanity would do anything to survive. We never asked if we should. The Kindled paid the price for our answer. They're still paying it. They'll pay it for the rest of their lives. He coughed, his breath rattling. Every civilization faces this choice eventually. How much of yourself do you sacrifice to survive? We learned the answer. Survival isn't the same as winning. And winning isn't the same as being right. Earth is safe. Humanity endures. But the Kindled will never forgive us. And they shouldn't. He died that night, his last words a confession and a warning.